Give it to God and free your mind from worries. We are creatures of burdened hearts, troubled minds, and restless souls. Our days are spent entangled in the snares of worry, grasping at anxieties as though they were our rightful possessions. We clutch our fears close, turning them over like a miser counts his gold, and in doing so we bind ourselves in invisible chains. But I tell you, there is another way, a higher way, a way that leads not to sorrow but to peace. People often hold on to their worries as though they are essential to their identity, believing that by constantly thinking about their problems, they can somehow prevent disaster. Worry becomes a habit, a shadow that follows them through every moment of the day. They wake with it in the morning, carry it through their work, and lie down with it at night, never realizing that this burden is one of their own making. It is not placed upon them by any external force, nor is it an unavoidable part of life. Rather, it is a chain they clasp around their own wrists, convinced that to let go would be an act of carelessness or irresponsibility. Anxieties often masquerade as a form of control. People believe that if they do not worry, they are not being diligent enough, not taking life seriously enough. But what has worrying ever truly accomplished? Has a single sleepless night ever solved a problem? Has a restless mind ever altered the course of fate? The truth is that worry changes nothing except the person who carries it. It wears them down, clouds their judgment, and steals the joy from their days. It is a thief that takes without giving, an enemy that pretends to be a friend. History bears witness to this truth. The greatest leaders and thinkers were not those who were paralyzed by fear, but those who understood that worry could not add anything of value to their lives. Consider the rulers of ancient kingdoms who spent their days fretting over enemies that never came, who built fortresses to guard against threats that never materialized. They spent their wealth, their health, and their very lives in pursuit of security, yet in the end they found none. Their days were consumed by what-ifs, their nights by restless thoughts, and when the end finally came, it was not the battles they had feared that undid them, but the slow erosion of their own peace. The burden of worry is unique in that it is entirely self-imposed. No one forces a person to carry it. No external power demands that they live in fear. And yet people clutch their anxieties as if they were treasures, unwilling to set them down. They believe that by holding on to their concerns, they are preparing for the future, but in reality, they are simply poisoning the present. Worry is a storm that rages within, a tempest that never ceases, leaving destruction in its wake. It drains energy, saps strength, and dims the light of hope. Some may argue that worry is necessary, that it is a sign of responsibility. A parent worries for their child, a worker for their job, a student for their future. But there is a difference between wise preparation and destructive anxiety. To plan for the future, to take necessary precautions, to think through decisions carefully. These are acts of wisdom. But to live in constant fear, to allow the mind to be consumed by endless what-ifs, is to surrender to a cruel master. Worry does not guide, it dominates. If one could step outside of their own mind and observe their worries from a distance, they would see how irrational many of them are. How often do the things we fear actually come to pass? And even when they do, does worrying about them in advance lessen their impact? Most of the time, the greatest suffering is not in the event itself, but in the endless anticipation of it. A person who spends months fearing a storm suffers more than the one who simply endures it when it comes. Ultimately, worry is a choice. It may not feel like one, for it creeps in subtly, disguising itself as concern, as preparation, as necessity. But at its core, it is something that we allow to take root in our minds. And if we have the power to hold on to it, we also have the power to release it. But to do so, one must first recognize that worry is not an obligation, not a duty, but a self-imposed burden, one that can be laid down at any moment. Throughout history, mankind has placed its trust in its own wisdom, strength, and ingenuity, believing that through sheer effort it could secure peace, prosperity, and control over the future. Yet, time and time again, history has shown that human striving alone is never enough. The greatest empires, built on intellect and might, have crumbled under the weight of their own ambitions. Kings and rulers, confident in their own power, have spent their lives fortifying their defenses, stockpiling riches and seeking alliances, only to watch everything slip through their fingers like sand. Human striving, no matter how great, is ultimately limited. Without God, it is as futile as trying to grasp the wind. Consider the ancient civilizations that once stood as the pinnacle of human achievement. The pharaohs of Egypt, believing themselves to be divine, built vast monuments to their own glory, convinced that their wisdom and preparation would grant them eternal security. Yet, where are their kingdoms now? Their palaces lie in ruins, their once mighty rule reduced to mere stories in history books. The same can be said of Rome, a civilization unparalleled in its time, its leaders believing that through governance, military might, and philosophy, they could establish an empire that would never fall. And yet, despite all their knowledge and strength, Rome did fall, not in a single night, but through the slow decay that comes when man believes he can sustain himself without the hand of God. In every era, there have been those who placed their trust in their own ability to control their destiny, believing that if they simply worked hard enough, planned well enough, and gathered enough resources, they could secure their own future. But the world does not bend to human will. No amount of worry or preparation can guarantee the outcome one desires. The strongest warriors have fallen in battle. The wealthiest merchants have lost everything in an instant, and the wisest scholars have faced questions they could not answer. What, then, remains for those who rely only on their own understanding? Disappointment, exhaustion, and ultimately despair. Even in personal life, this truth becomes evident. How often has a person spent years working tirelessly, sacrificing their health and their peace of mind, believing that if they just push a little harder, they will finally find the security they seek. Yet when they reach the pinnacle of success, they often find that it does not satisfy. The worries they had before still linger, and new ones take their place. A man who spends his whole life striving for wealth may find himself lying awake at night, not relieved but burdened with fears of losing what he has gained. A woman who has built her reputation on her own strength may discover that the pressures of maintaining it have only made her weary. Human striving alone does not bring peace, it only brings more striving. It is not wrong to work hard, to plan wisely, or to use the gifts one has been given. But the fatal mistake comes when one believes that these things alone are enough, that by sheer force of will they can dictate the course of their life. The truth, as history has shown again and again, is that no kingdom, no ruler, no individual can stand securely on human effort alone. Without God, all striving is in vain. The one who trusts in his own wisdom is like a man building his house on shifting sand. It may seem strong for a time, but when the storms come it cannot stand. Yet those who place their trust in something greater than themselves find a security that human strength can never provide. The farmer who plants his crops must work the soil, tend to his fields, and protect his harvest, but in the end he knows that the growth itself is beyond his control. The rain must come, the seasons must turn, and life must be given by a force beyond his hands. And by the same token, the seasons must turn, and life must be given by a force beyond his hands. So it is with all things. Human striving has its place, but it is not the foundation upon which true security is built. Only in trusting God does one find a peace that does not fade, a certainty that does not crumble, and a future that is not dependent on the fragile efforts of man. Worry is a burden that people carry as if it has the power to change the future, yet history and experience both reveal a simple truth. Worry accomplishes nothing. It does not alter circumstances, prevent misfortune, or secure success. It does not extend life, heal sickness, or provide solutions. Instead, it drains energy, robs joy, and darkens the mind with fear. People often cling to their anxieties, convinced that by worrying they are being responsible or prepared, yet in reality, worry is nothing more than a cruel illusion. It demands everything and gives nothing in return. Nature itself testifies to the futility of worry. Consider the birds of the air. They neither sow nor reap, yet they are fed each day. They do not store up supplies for the years to come, nor do they lose sleep over whether the sun will rise tomorrow, and yet they survive and flourish. The flowers of the field, so delicate and brief in their existence, do not weave their own garments, yet they are adorned in beauty greater than the richest kings of history. If these simple creatures, who do not toil in anxiety, are cared for so perfectly, how much more will the Creator care for those made in His own image? Yet, in contrast to the effortless trust of nature, mankind is constantly restless, forever dwelling on uncertainties. There is always something to fear, some distant tragedy that might unfold, some hardship that may arise. It is easy to believe that by fixating on these possibilities, one can somehow control them. A person worries over their finances, believing that their constant anxiety will somehow secure their future. Another frets over their health, convinced that their fear alone will protect them from illness. Parents spend sleepless nights fearing for their children, as if their worry itself will shield them from harm. But does any of this actually change the outcome? Does worry ever prevent the very things people fear? Most of the time, the worst things we imagine never come to pass. The disasters we anticipate often remain nothing more than shadows in our minds, tormenting us without ever becoming reality. And even when difficulties do arise, the suffering caused by worry is often worse than the event itself. A person who dreads a storm for weeks experiences far more distress than the one who simply endures it when it comes. Fear multiplies pain, making every trial heavier than it needs to be. Beyond being futile, worry is also a thief. It steals peace from the present moment, clouding the mind with thoughts of an uncertain future. A person can have everything they need, food on their table, a roof over their head, loved ones by their side, and yet, if their mind is consumed with worry, they will not enjoy any of it. Instead of seeing their blessings, they will see only the possibility of loss. Instead of feeling gratitude, they will feel dread. Worry takes what is good and taints it with fear, making even the brightest days feel dim. If worrying could truly add something of value to life, then perhaps it would be worth clinging to. But it does not. It cannot turn back time, prevent hardship, or bring certainty to the unknown. The time spent in worry is time wasted. Moments lost that could have been filled with peace, purpose, and trust. To live in constant fear of the future is to be imprisoned by something that does not even exist. It is to sacrifice the beauty of the present for the sake of an imagined disaster. Ultimately, the choice is clear. One can spend their days trapped in worry, gaining nothing but weariness, or they can release their fears, trusting that the one who provides for the birds and the flowers will provide for them as well. The world is not held together by human fear, nor is the future secured by human anxiety. Worry does nothing but trust brings peace. And in that peace, life is truly lived. Fear has a way of imprisoning the mind, trapping people in a cycle of anxiety that blinds them to the truth. It whispers lies, convincing them that they must hold on to their burdens, that they must constantly analyze, prepare, and anticipate every possible disaster. Fear tells them that if they loosen their grip, if they stop worrying, even for a moment, something terrible will happen, and so they live not in freedom, but in bondage. Bound not by external chains, but by the ones they have forged in their own minds. Many believe that carrying their burdens alone is a sign of strength. They think that if they do not constantly guard against every danger, if they do not take full responsibility for every possible outcome, they are failing in their duty. A parent believes they must worry endlessly about their child's future, as if their sleepless nights will somehow protect them. A worker believes they must stress over every detail of their job, as if their anxiety will secure their success. A student believes they must fear failure at every turn, as if dread itself will ensure achievement. But in truth, none of these things are signs of wisdom or responsibility. They are signs of enslavement to fear. Fear does not guide, it dominates. It does not offer solutions, it creates confusion. A person who allows fear to rule them will find that they are never truly at peace. Even in moments of joy, there will always be a shadow lurking in their mind, a voice reminding them that something could go wrong. Fear does not allow rest. It demands total control over the heart, whispering that danger is always near, that security is always at risk. And so people carry their burdens, like a traveler carrying a heavy load, refusing to set it down because they believe they must bear it alone. The great tragedy is that most of what people fear never actually happens. How many hours are wasted dreading things that never come to pass? How much energy is spent worrying over problems that never materialize? And even when troubles do arise, the suffering caused by fear beforehand is often worse than the difficulty itself. A person who fears losing their job may find that they spend years in misery, only to never actually be fired. Another who dreads an illness may torment themselves for decades, only to live a long and healthy life. Fear is a cruel master, taking more than it ever gives. Even when hardships do come, fear does not soften the blow, it only makes it heavier. A person who has spent years fearing death does not find it easier to face when the time comes. A person who has lived in terror of failure does not find comfort in the moment of loss. Worry does not prepare the heart, it only weakens it. Fear does not make a person stronger, it drains their strength long before the battle even begins. History has shown that those who lived in fear were never truly free. Rulers who feared losing power often became tyrants, controlling others in a desperate attempt to secure their own position. Wealthy men who feared poverty became misers, hoarding riches but never enjoying them. Even ordinary people, those who allowed fear to govern their decisions, often found that they never truly lived. They avoided risks, shied away from opportunities, and clung to comfort, all because they feared what might happen if they stepped beyond the familiar. But in doing so, they missed out on the beauty and fullness of life itself. The prison of fear is one that many build with their own hands. They construct walls of worry, bars of doubt, and locks of anxiety, convinced that these things will somehow protect them. But in truth, they only isolate themselves from peace, from joy, and from trust. To be free from fear is not to ignore the realities of life, nor is it to pretend that hardships do not exist. Rather, it is to recognize that fear adds nothing of value, and that the weight of worry is not something one is meant to carry alone. There is a truth that has echoed through history, whispered in the hearts of those who have faced despair, and proclaimed by those who have walked through the darkest valleys. We are not meant to carry our burdens alone. The weight of worry, fear, and uncertainty is too great for any one person to bear. Yet, rather than release these burdens, people hold on to them as if they were a necessary part of life. They cling to their anxieties, convinced that if they do not, they will lose control. But there is an invitation that has stood the test of time, one that has been offered to the weary and the broken for generations. Cast your cares upon him, for he cares for you. To cast one's cares upon God is not an act of weakness, but of wisdom. It is not an escape from responsibility, but an acknowledgement of reality. No human being, no matter how strong or determined, can control everything. The storms of life come without warning. The seasons change beyond our command, and the future remains shrouded in mystery. Yet, despite this, many live as though they must bear the weight of the world upon their shoulders. They believe that if they do not worry, they are not being diligent enough, that if they do not constantly analyze every possible outcome, they will be caught unprepared. But worry does not prepare, it only exhausts. Fear does not protect, it only paralyzes. And anxiety does not secure the future, it only robs the present of its peace. There is something profoundly freeing about surrender. To place one's burdens into the hands of God is not to abandon effort or forsake wisdom. It is to recognize that some things are beyond human control. A farmer plants his crops, but he cannot make the rain fall. A sailor sets his course, but he cannot control the winds. A mother watches over her child, but she cannot predict every danger that may come. In every aspect of life, there is a point where human effort must end and trust must begin. The refusal to surrender is often rooted in pride. People want to believe that they are strong enough, wise enough, and capable enough to handle everything on their own. They fear that if they let go, everything will fall apart. But in reality, the refusal to trust is what causes the greatest suffering. A person who insists on carrying every burden alone will eventually find themselves crushed under its weight. The mind that refuses to release its worries will become a battlefield of unrest, constantly at war with itself, constantly searching for answers it cannot find. There is a reason why those who have truly learned to trust in God often seem at peace, even in the midst of difficulties. It is not because they are unaware of life's struggles, nor is it because they ignore reality. It is because they have come to understand a deeper truth. They were never meant to carry the burdens of life alone. They have learned that surrender is not defeat, but freedom. By giving their worries to God, they are not giving up. They are gaining something far greater, peace that surpasses understanding. One of the greatest tragedies is that many refuse this invitation. They continue to wrestle with their fears, convinced that they must handle everything themselves. They spend sleepless nights trying to solve problems that are beyond their control. They allow fear to dictate their decisions, leading them into a life of hesitation and anxiety. But all the while, the invitation remains the same. Give it to me. Lay it down. You are not alone. To accept this truth is to step into a life free from the bondage of worry. It does not mean that troubles will never come, nor does it mean that life will be without hardship, but it does mean that no burden must be carried alone. There is one who cares, one who sees, one who is willing to take every worry, every fear, and every sorrow, and in exchange give peace beyond measure. Letting go is often mistaken for weakness. The world teaches that strength is found in control, in holding on tightly to every aspect of life, in carrying burdens without complaint. People are taught that to be strong means to fight through every challenge on their own, to rely on no one, to face their fears with sheer determination. Surrender, on the other hand, is seen as failure, a sign of giving up, of lacking resilience. But true strength is not found in clinging to control. It is found in the wisdom to release what was never meant to be carried alone. Consider the great warriors of history. A soldier who enters battle weighed down by unnecessary burdens will not last long. He must be swift, prepared, and focused on the fight ahead. If he insists on carrying every piece of armor, every weapon, and every supply, believing that his strength alone will sustain him, he will soon find himself exhausted, unable to move forward. The wise soldier knows what to take with him and what to leave behind. In the same way, a person who refuses to let go of their fears, anxieties, and need for control will find themselves worn down, unable to move forward in life with strength and purpose. Letting go does not mean abandoning responsibility. It does not mean neglecting duties or ignoring the realities of life. Rather, it means understanding where human effort must end and trust must begin. A gardener may plant seeds, water them, and tend the soil, but he cannot force them to grow. A mother may guide her child, protect them, and teach them, but she cannot control every step they take. A person may work hard, plan carefully, and make wise decisions, but they cannot dictate the future. Strength is not found in endless striving, but in the ability to release what is beyond one's control. Many suffer because they refuse to let go. They believe that if they do not constantly worry, they are not being careful enough. If they do not hold on tightly to their fears, they might be caught off guard. If they do not try to control every aspect of life, things will fall apart. But this endless grasping only leads to exhaustion. The tighter one holds on to fear, the stronger it becomes. The more one clings to control, the more they realize how little they actually have. The harder one tries to carry everything alone, the heavier the burden grows. There is wisdom in surrender. To trust in something greater than oneself is not an act of weakness, but of profound strength. It takes courage to admit that not everything is within one's power, that some battles are not meant to be fought alone, that some burdens must be placed into hands far stronger than one's own. Those who have learned to let go find that they are not weakened by surrender, but strengthened by it. Their hearts are lighter, their minds clearer, their steps more confident. They are no longer consumed by worry, no longer weighed down by anxiety. They move forward, not because they have all the answers, but because they know they do not need to. History is filled with those who lived and died in the relentless pursuit of control. Kings who feared losing their thrones spent their lives in paranoia, never knowing peace. Scholars who sought to understand everything found themselves lost in endless questions, never satisfied. Even the wealthiest, the most powerful, and the most intelligent have been brought to their knees by the simple truth that no human being can hold on to everything forever. But those who have learned to trust, to release, to let go, they are the ones who find freedom. To let go is not to fall into despair, it is to rise above it. It is to stand with the knowledge that true strength is not found in grasping but in releasing, not in fear but in trust, not in striving but in surrender. And in that surrender there is a peace that no storm can shake, no hardship can steal, and no fear can overcome. Peace is not something that can be grasped by force, nor is it something that can be manufactured through human effort alone. It is not found in wealth, power, or knowledge, for history has shown that even the richest, the strongest, and the wisest have been plagued by anxiety. The world chases after peace as though it were a prize to be won, believing that if they can just solve their problems, control their circumstances, or remove all uncertainty, then they will finally find rest. But this kind of peace is an illusion, always just out of reach, always slipping through the fingers of those who pursue it. True peace is not the absence of problems, but the presence of trust. Trust in something greater than oneself. Trust that there is a purpose beyond what is seen. Trust that even in the storms of life, there is a hand that holds all things together. Many believe that peace will come when their circumstances improve. They think, if I could just get a better job, then I would feel secure. Or, if I could just resolve this conflict, then I would be at peace. But life is never free from difficulties. There is always another challenge waiting, another uncertainty ahead, another reason to worry. If peace is dependent on perfect circumstances, then it will never last, because circumstances are always changing. The one who waits for peace to come through external stability will spend their entire life waiting. But the one who learns to rest in trust, even in the midst of hardship, will find that peace is not something to be chased, it is something to be received. The greatest figures in history, those who faced trials beyond what most can imagine, were not those who lived without fear, but those who found peace despite it. A leader standing before a battle does not know what the outcome will be. Yet, if he is grounded in trust, he does not tremble. A prisoner facing an uncertain fate may not know what tomorrow holds. Yet, if his heart is anchored in something greater than himself, he does not despair. Peace is not found in certainty, it is found in surrender. It is found in the understanding that one does not have to know all things, control all things, or foresee all things in order to be at rest. Worry, on the other hand, is a thief. It robs the present moment of its joy, replacing it with fear of the unknown. It whispers lies, convincing the mind that it must carry every burden, that it must constantly analyze, prepare, and control. But worry cannot add a single hour to life. It cannot prevent trouble, nor can it ensure success. It only serves to darken the mind, to make even the brightest days seem dim. A person consumed by worry may be surrounded by blessings but unable to see them, trapped in a cycle of fear that blinds them to the goodness that is already present. There is a peace that surpasses understanding, a peace that does not depend on circumstances but on trust. This peace is not shaken by hardship, nor is it destroyed by uncertainty. It is a peace that remains even when the storms rage, even when the answers are unclear, even when the future is unknown. It is the peace of the one who has laid down their burdens, who has placed their fears into hands far stronger than their own, who has recognized that they were never meant to walk this path alone. To find this peace is to step out of the prison of fear and into the freedom of trust. It is to look at the uncertainties of life and say, I do not know what tomorrow holds, but I know that I am not alone. It is to understand that peace is not something earned, nor is it something that can be achieved through striving. It is a gift, given freely to those who are willing to release their grip on control and place their trust where it belongs. And in this peace there is rest, not the temporary rest that comes from fleeting comfort, but the deep, unshakable rest that comes from knowing that all things are held in hands far greater than one's own. The act of trusting completely is not a small step, nor is it an easy one. It requires the surrender of the deepest fears, the release of control, and the willingness to believe that there is a purpose beyond what the eyes can see. Trust is not built in a single moment, nor is it a passive state of mind. It is an ongoing choice, a daily act of laying down burdens and refusing to take them up again. It is the decision to believe that even when the road is unclear, even when the future is uncertain, even when troubles arise, there is still a greater plan at work. The struggle of humanity has always been the desire to control the uncontrollable. People plan their lives, map out their futures, and set expectations for how things should unfold. They convince themselves that if they work hard enough, think far enough ahead, or prepare well enough, they can ensure a smooth and predictable journey. But life does not bend to human will. Storms come without warning. Doors that once stood open suddenly close. The things once counted on for security fade away, and when control slips from their grasp, many are left in fear, unable to understand why their efforts were not enough. But the truth is, security was never meant to be found in control. It was never meant to be found in wealth, status, or careful planning. True security is found in trust. A trust that does not waver when circumstances change. A trust that does not crumble when life takes an unexpected turn. The one who trusts completely does not fear the unknown, for they understand that they were never meant to navigate it alone. They do not wrestle with anxiety over what tomorrow may bring, because they know that tomorrow has already been accounted for. They do not live in the constant struggle of trying to hold everything together because they understand that their hands were never meant to bear such a weight. The beauty of complete trust is that it brings freedom. Freedom from worry, freedom from fear, freedom from the exhausting effort of trying to control what was never meant to be controlled. Those who have walked this path know that it is not about blind optimism or ignoring reality. It is not about pretending that hardships do not exist. Rather, it is about seeing the storms of life and standing firm, not because of one's own strength, but because of the unshakable foundation upon which they stand. History has shown that those who trust fully are the ones who remain steady when others fall into despair. They are the ones who find peace in the midst of chaos, who remain hopeful even when all seems lost. They are the ones who, even in suffering, do not lose sight of the greater purpose at work. It is not that they are immune to hardship, nor that they do not experience moments of doubt, but rather that their trust is greater than their fear. They understand that even when they cannot see the full picture, they are being led by one who can. Many resist this kind of trust because it requires surrender. It requires the release of self-sufficiency, the laying down of pride, the acknowledgement that human strength alone is not enough. It is far easier to cling to worry, to hold on to control, to insist on handling everything alone. But those who take the step of surrender find something far greater than what they left behind. They find a peace that does not depend on circumstances, a strength that does not fade in difficulty, and a confidence that does not crumble under uncertainty. To trust completely is to live fully. It is to wake each day without the weight of fear pressing down, to move forward without hesitation, to rest in the knowledge that no step is taken alone. It is to trade anxiety for assurance, doubt for faith, and striving for rest. And in that place of trust, life is no longer a battle to be fought alone, but a journey walked with peace, purpose, and unwavering confidence.